known in many names. We want to first begin our program recognizing the Creator for allowing us the opportunity to be liberators, fighters for the liberation of our people. We want to thank the ancestors for allowing us to be here, and that the ancestors will continue to lead and guide us as we deliberate today and as we do our everyday activities. We want to thank the ancestors, and also our gratitude, especially to the Creator for allowing us to have ancestors, to have the determination to move forward in a righteous way for a worldwide liberation movement for African people. On behalf of COBRA International Affairs Commission, and along with its co-chairs, we want to welcome everyone here. Thank you for your time, your patience, your considerations, your input into today's activities. We want to also especially thank our invited presenters for their time, for their knowledge, skills, and ability that they're bringing to the table for us today. We want to also thank the participants, the guests that are here, the attendees, for your time and for your contributions, your questions, remarks that you may have. And also we want to thank the attendees and all that they have brought to the table. And we want to also bring our meeting to a beginning by reciting the African pledge. We will remember the humanity, glory, and suffering of our ancestors and honor the struggle of our elders. We will strive to bring new values and new life to our people. We will have peace and harmony among us. We will be loving, sharing, creative. We will work, study, and listen so we may learn so we may teach. We will cultivate self-reliance. We will struggle to resurrect and unify our homeland, Africa. We will raise many children for our nation. We will have discipline, patience, devotion, and courage. We will live as models to provide new direction for our people. We will be free and self-determining. We are an African people, and we will win, and we will win. We have won. As I stated earlier, we want to welcome all our guests, our presenters, our ancestors, but also we have with us today our national co-chair and COBRA national co-chair, our Sister Kenneth Henry, with us today. And if so, like, you may offer a few words now or whatever your pleasure may be.
Peace and blessings to everyone. Brother Moss, I can't follow you. Your opening is phenomenal. So I'm just going to say thank you so much for being willing to get us all together. This is an amazing conversation. It is right on time. And I hope to be able to take away some information that I can share far and wide, because every time I talk about self-identity, I walk away confused. So thank you so much for this. I really appreciate all of you, because without you, there can never, ever be true reparatory justice. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you, Sister Co-Chair. We appreciate you being here. I'm not sure if Brother James, the male co-chair, is here. If so, you are also allowed to make any remarks you may have.
I don't believe he's here.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you again, Sister Kenneth. Moving forward, all protocols observed. From now, we will move to female co-chair, Sister Esther, and she will give us guidance for the process forward.
Thank you, Brother Morgan, and warm greetings, family, on the call. I am female co-chair, Sister Esther Kosei, and welcoming you to our workshop on African identity and reparations. And so we are hoping in this workshop to explore to what extent African identity shapes our reparations thought, our claims making, and our movement building. Recognizing that reparations frameworks must reflect the cultural perspectives of those of us seeking repair, we hope to examine how our own African knowledge systems, our own ancestral wisdom, and collective identity inform and strengthen our people's pursuit of holistic reparatory justice locally, nationally, and internationally. In terms of the workshop objectives, we're hoping to explore the relationship between African identity and reparations claims, to analyze how cultural continuity and disruption impacts our claims for reparatory justice, and also what kind of strategies do we need to develop for identity-centered reparations advocacy. So identity is our focus, and we have three wonderful guests who are going to help us explore that. So we have Mama Ayodele Kofi, and I will introduce them more when they come to speak. We have Her Royal Majesty, Queen Mother Somovo I, Dr. Dawoti Desir. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Thank you. And we also have Jeremy Enriquez as well. But when they come to speak, we will give a proper introduction. And I just wanted to also highlight how topical and relevant this is to COBRA, this whole subject, because as most of you will know, COBRA outlines 5 key injury areas in terms of where African people, and in particular African Americans, but the wider African family, have suffered injury due to our enslavement and the continued legacies of that. And the first injury area is the injury to peoplehood and nationhood, which refers to the destruction of African cultural, social, and political institutions and the denial of self-determination. But in terms of the injury to peoplehood and nationhood, this is one of the central or key harms that we as a people have faced. And this is because peoplehood and nationhood are the foundation of a group's identity, our sense of belonging, our ability to self-govern. And so the destruction of this and the tampering of this actually undermines the very core of our existence. So it's central to our conversation, our strategies, our tactics, our movement buildings to effect and secure holistic repair or reparations. And we have some guiding questions that are helping to stimulate our thought. Not only are we going to hear from our wonderful guest contributors, but we've also posed some questions because we know that this is a topic that everyone who's on this call is interested in. So some of these guiding questions that are really going to stimulate all our thoughts, and there'll be plenty of time after we've heard from our guest contributors to hear from you also. What does it mean to be African? You know, how does group identity establish our standing for reparations claims? How does our own personal understanding of African identity shape our visions of reparations or repair? What responsibilities do we have to ancestors and to our ancestresses in pursuing reparations? You know, who were they? How did they self-identify? How does a shared sense of identity strengthen our collective and our group advocacy for reparations? And what evidence of ancestral harm strengthens our reparations claims? How best do we quantify cultural loss and erasure as a group harm, necessitating reparations? And what is the role of African identity formation in healing collective trauma? So these are just some of the questions that we are posing, and our guest contributors are all coming at this issue from their own perspective. that we thought would be really, really interesting to hear and unique at the same time to help stimulate us. And so I think without further ado, we should probably introduce our first guest speaker, Mama Ayodele Kofi. And but before I probably do that, I just wanted to make people aware. I did announce it at the beginning, but I know that there's been some more joining us, and there's still people joining us now, that this workshop is actually being broadcast on XTV in Belize. Sister Yaya Marin Coleman, who is part of the International Affairs Commission, also works for XTV and has kindly been able to facilitate that, as they often do broadcast our workshops. So just so that everyone is aware, it is being broadcast on XTV in Belize and also on Facebook. And I think that's fine. So how we'll proceed is we're going to first of all hear from our guest contributors today. And after they have all spoken, so please, reserve your thoughts and your comments and your questions till afterwards. And then we will open up for a general discussion to hear from everyone else. Okay? So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first guest contributor, Mama Ayodele Kofi. And Mama Ayodele, I hope that you don't mind, but I've had to synthesize your extensive bio, but I'll just share with you most of it. So Mama Ayodele Kofi is a nationalist, Pan-Africanist and freedom fighter dedicated to land independence, self-determination and reparations for African people. She currently serves as the Vice President of the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa, the PGRNA, a role she has held since 2020, and has contributed to its ministries of health and society, education and foreign affairs. A long-time advocate for African-centered education, Mama Ayodele has taught in Ghana, Benin and Mississippi, and is a certified educator promoting African history and culture. A founding member of grassroots organizations like Sisters of Divine Nature, and co-organizer of the Afri-Indigenous Holistic Women's Retreat, Mama Ayodele has also held leadership roles in the African American Association of Ghana and the Ghana Association of Women Entrepreneurs. She is an active member of COBRA and the National African American Reparations Commission, which is, it's actually the International Affairs Commission, that should say, and has co-chaired the African World Reparations and Repatriation Truth Commission, and that was in 1998 to 1999. A certified holistic health practitioner, Mama Ayodele specializes in womb wellness, offering services as a yoni steam practitioner, womb yoga instructor and birth doula. She co-owns Highly Blessed Organic Herbs, providing organic medicinal herbs from Jamaica. A mother of 5 and grandmother of 3, Mama Ayodele's life embodies resilience, education, and healing in the fight for African liberation and justice. Thank you, Mama Ayodele.
Free the land, can you hear me? Okay, thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm greeting everyone with, of course, divine love, spirit, honor. Definitely honoring the other speakers that will be on this panel today, as well as the audience. I want to get started. I'm not sure if I have 10 minutes to speak or less. However, I want to speak about what the Republic of New Africa identifies our citizens as. We believe that every person who is a descendant of an enslaved Africa here on the shores of Turtle Island, which of course is America, is a new African. The reason why we say that we are new Africans is in our what we call our preamble to the Declaration of Independence, which was given to the world March 31st, 1968. We identify ourselves as a mixture of all the different ethnic groups that were brought to this land, who were inbred, who were mixed in, who were, of course, tossed and turned, as well as the indigenous mixed in. And so we come up as a nation of people who share a culture, who have a history, who basically have the same language, the same mores as a nation of New Africans. That is specifically why we call ourselves New African. Now, of course, we have people who still identify with the word Negro, colored, Africans, Africans born in America, Afro-descendants, Afro-Americans, Black, all of that. But we as a people in the Republic of New Africa, our battle cry, of course, is we are New Africans because we have a historical reality that no one else can claim. If you go and do your DNA test, you're not going to come up with one particular tribe or nation from Africa. It's going to come with a mixture of different ethnic groups, and that is the reason why we say, as well as the indigenous, because we believe that many of us are mixed in with the indigenous as well as the conqueror. But for the most part, if you are if you are a descendant of an enslaved African, that is the reason why we define ourselves, call ourselves, and name ourselves New Africans. Not to say that you don't have the right to identify with anything else. We just want us all to be in agreement that we are here to proclaim to the world that we want to develop a new African nation within the shores of the United States. We want others around the world to recognize our right of self-determination, our right to reparations. I want to quote you from, of course, our documents, that we recognize that we have a common language, that we have a common history, and we have a common economic life, and of course, material realities that we as New Africans here on the shores of America, as united with the Africans around the world, we have the right to claim ourselves free and independent. What we decided as a nation is that we're looking for self-determination, we're looking for independence, we're looking for, and here is the kill word, the buzzword, we're looking for sovereignty. We want state power. We want that to happen. And of course, within our Declaration of Independence, we are asking for reparations. That was one of our first things that we decided as a nation in America, in our document, the Code of Emotion, in our Declaration of Independence, which I hope most of you have a copy of. One of the things that is happening around the world is that in order for us to step into the world stage, we need countries to recognize who we are as an independent nation in America and to offer their support, not only verbally, but economically, spiritually, of course, trade. And that has been our struggle over the last, what we say, almost 60 years. I want to pause for a minute. I want just 1 minute. We just celebrated February 21st, which we call our New African New Year. We are honoring our founding father, one of them, which is, of course, the Honorable Malcolm X, who was assassinated February 21st, 60 years ago. So we are now into 60 ADM, after the death of our comrade brother, Malcolm. So I want to also share with you that we have survived all of the things that could happen to us as a people here in America. Not to say that those brothers and sisters in the diaspora have not suffered some of the same atrocities, but we want to highlight to our people, everyone is considered a citizen of the Republic of New Africa if you desire to at least acknowledge that you are the descendant of an enslaved African. We want you to know that you have the right to conscious citizenship and participation in the nation. We align ourselves with the indigenous nations of this continent, if they call themselves indigenous or aboriginal, as they are the landowners. Some people, they identify as Moors, as, of course, aboriginals. We in the Republic of New Africa understand that we have been here for more than 400 years. We are claiming the 5 states in the South because that was how America, Britain, France, and Spain gained some of their wealth off of the back, the blood, the sweat, the tears of our ancestors to launch themselves into the power that they are today. I also want to say that we are asking all organizations, people who identify in various ethnicities, that join us in our fight, because at the ultimate end of the day, our aim is for land, self-determination, independence, sovereignty, and of course, reparations. So we've been leading the fight for a long time, and COBRA has been a part of this fight because one of our founding fathers was instrumental in setting up in COBRA and going to the world and keeping the voice of New Africa very, very prevalent. We have books, particularly Reparations, yes. We have documents from, of course, Obadeli, Mama Nkechi, Chokwe Lumumba, that has been sent to the U.S. Senate in 1986 to promote our call for reparations for Blacks in America, New Africans in America. And so our position is come support, be a conscious citizen, do what you need to do. In other words, be a part of the movement to become a nation, to build for the nation, and to identify you. Now, one of the things that we do promote, one of our creed, we have a New African creed, and we say, of course, it's creed number 8, that we believe in the Malcolm X doctrine, that we must organize upon this land and hold a plebiscite, which is directly in line with many of the organizations today. And after the plebiscite, we tell the world by a vote that the land is free and we are independent, and that after the vote, we must stand ready to defend ourselves, establishing our nation beyond contradiction. That is our battle cry. We are Malcolmites, we are Garveyites, we are Queen Mother Moore, anything and everything that brings us to nationhood, statehood, we are actively employing. So with that, I will yield to the other speakers and be prepared to ask questions later. Thank you. Free the land.
By any means, thank you, Mama Ayo, for your presentation and your very stimulating thoughts. We're going to move swiftly on to hear from Brother Jeremy. So Jeremy, otherwise known as Jerry Enriquez, is a distinguished Belizean educator, writer, and social activist with nearly 5 decades of experience championing human rights, indigenous rights, and social justice. Known for his deep commitment to understanding and addressing historical, socioeconomic, and political systems that affect marginalized communities, particularly African descent peoples in Belize. Jerry has been a vocal advocate for equity and empowerment. His work as an author and development consultant reflects his dedication to preserving cultural heritage and fostering self-awareness and resilience. Through his efforts, Jeremy has become a prominent voice for justice and progress in Belize. Over to you, Brother Jeremy.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and I'm very happy to join this esteemed community. I will admit, just as a follow-up to the introduction, that over the past 2 weeks, I was at the Supreme Court, taking the government of Belize to court as we're fighting for justice in our political system. So that struggle continues. So just to put that, mention that since I've been in the news for the past 2 weeks or so, challenging an unjust system. I'd like to talk a little bit more about my whole perspectives on reparations and what drew me to this, where I came from. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about my ancestral history. And then I will offer some perspectives as to where we're at and how we can all join forces in our own struggle for justice and reparations from wherever we are. I come from a group called the Garinagu, who reside mainly in southern Belize, in Honduras, and in Guatemala. But we are also part of the African experience of human trafficking when we were forced from our roots and then loaded on cargo ships by our oppressors to have us all on this side of the world against our will. So the story of my group of Afro-descendants, African ancestors, is that around the early 1600s, 1635 thereabouts, and perhaps earlier than that. But the genesis starts with this ship that was traveling from Africa to the Caribbean and was shipwrecked by a storm or mutiny off the coast of St. Vincent in the Caribbean. Even though before 1635, there were sightings of Africans on that island that was documented by French priests. So around 1635, this Spanish ship shipwrecked, and the group of Africans escaped to St. Vincent and established their community of Africans there and intermingled with the indigenous Caribs who were there and took on some of their cultures, as well as we held on to some of the African roots to form this group called the Garinagu. And so between 1635 to all the way into the 1760s, this group expanded and lived in relative peace until the colonizers came, namely the British, who wanted to occupy their land and in fact take away the land to expand their sugar plantations, since there was a high demand for sugar in Europe. And so, a long story short, they engaged the Black Caribs, they were called in those days, in a war in 1796, burnt their crops, killed their leaders, destroyed their homes, and then loaded them onto ships and placed them first on the barren island of Balisao, about 4,400 of the captives, of which, and they had them there from October to about March. For about 6 months, half the number died through the horrible barren conditions on the island. So it was like a epidemic of typhoid fever that wiped out half the group. The remaining half were transported to Roatan, forced, and they were exiled permanently with the hope of destroying this group that were fighting for their freedom against the British oppressors. So from Roatan, when they landed there in April 1797, they spread to Belize. The first group came to Belize around 1802. But when they arrived in Belize, there were a group of enslaved Africans also in the Belize settlement So the British were faced with another problem. While they needed the labor of the Garinago to harvest timber, they had to keep both groups, of both African groups, separate, and they separated them psychologically and physically. So that is why all Garifuna communities in Belize are in southern Belize, to keep them far away from the community of enslaved Africans at the time. So the British played divide and conquer kinds of narratives to keep both groups separated, and that would affect both groups for well over a century in how they viewed each other and how they interacted among each other. So that's basically what my ancestors went through from Africa to St. Vincent to Belize, all in a nutshell. We came to Belize, and so here we were working in the timber plantations, harvesting mahogany, which was in high demand in Europe at the time. But because of the intense discrimination that we faced by the British colonizers, around that time, the Roman Catholic Church was interested or made aggressive moves to, in a sense, recolonize us in their religion. And up to this day, most Garifuna persons belong to the Roman Catholic religion since the 1840s, when there were aggressive moves to Christianize the so-called savages, cannibals, devil worshippers were terms that they referred to us. And so there were, so while the British merchants wanted our labor for enriching their own selves, the church was also one of the agents of colonization in a way that they worked very hard to destroy our religion. And when I was growing up, this was centuries later, after they first landed, even our language was forbidden to be spoken in schools. The nuns sometimes would even punish us for speaking our language. So that would affect, in a sense, our identity. So here's a group of people fighting to maintain language, their culture, which we have done well in the expressive forms in our dance and music and language. There is still that decline. And there is that move towards, in a sense, resurrecting the language, other aspects of the language that is rapidly declining because our school system has, over the years, forbade us from speaking it. And when children come out of families who are so-called educated, who have gone through the school system, they're most likely not to speak their language and most likely to lose more aspects of their identity. So we have the role of church and state that tries to bring us into their own worldview and their own dominant culture. So in a sense, the more people tended to be educated at the time in the school system, the less they were in connection with themselves, with their language, their culture. That seemed to be lost. So it was almost like plus development minus culture. And those who tended to hold on very strongly to their culture were those who in the end preserved it to what it is today. So that influence in our identity from church, state, and the education system has shaped people in a way that has drawn them away from themselves. And that is what I believe are some key issues for us to examine when we look at reparations. One of the other challenges and faults, one of the challenges that we face in all of this is the lack of awareness, even the lack of teaching of African history in our schools. So many times in these church schools or state schools, we're learning European history, we're learning, in a sense, to be servants of the Eurocentric kinds of dominance in our colonial Belize system and post-colonial, where there was a strong and still is a strong resistance towards the teaching of African and indigenous history. I'm very grateful to the UBAD Educational Foundation, of which Yaya plays a leading role, for keeping that in the front burner to remind the education system that we need to honor and respect our African identity, even through our own persistent challenges to the Ministry of Education to allow students to be able to have their hair natural. There are some schools that used to forbid students from wearing their hair in a natural way. They have to straighten it with hot comb or perm, or otherwise they're sent home. And so there's not that kind of policy. So you see that our identity is shaped by these forces, but unless there is some deep awareness as to where we come from and where we're going, then people will continue to feel, in a sense, rudderless or lost as to how they could confidently express who they are. So if we have the alienation through the education system, there are an imposed religious system that people must follow through because we have a strong church-state system. We have these forces that tend to alienate people from themselves. And unless people turn into themselves to recognize and appreciate the ancestors within, because each of us are just continuations of our ancestors. And the more we recognize that, the more we are in tune with that, then we will constantly be bombarded by the global media, by local media, and all the institutions that somehow are designed to alienate us from ourselves. And so the real struggle then is, how do we develop self-awareness? How do we develop the kind of depth of awareness that will build the confidence to spread towards change, transformation, and finding the goals and achieving the goals that we are setting out to achieve. So I will leave it at that for right now, but the key, I would like to also mention that the more deeply we're connected with ourselves, the deeper the awareness we have of the flow of the ancestors within us, and the more confident we can stand against the forces that are still trying to destroy us and who we are. And so we need that groundedness for us to achieve it. Thanks very much, everyone.
Giving thanks, Brother Jeremy, for your contribution also, which we will engage with more after we've heard from our final guest contributor. So I'd now like to introduce Her Royal Majesty Queen Mother Samevo I, Dr. Dorothy Desir. Hope I've pronounced that correctly. Thank you. And again, I have to do a précis because there's a very extensive biography, but I'll just share some key aspects. Born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, of Cuban and Haitian parents, Her Royal Majesty is the Queen Mother of the African Diaspora, Benin Republic. In 2022, she was enthroned at the Royal Palace of Agonlin and adhered to the Haut Conseil des Rois du Benin, my pronunciation, please forgive me, which is the High Council of Kings of Benin. Her Majesty serves as the High Council of Kings of Benin's ambassador at large. Queen Mother is also a member of the Forum of Sovereigns and Traditional Leaders of Africa, and she is the founder also of the Imperial Corps Agoji of the African Diaspora, an educational and leadership program which connects women of the African diaspora to their sisters in Africa via online classes and a pilgrimage to the Benin Republic. Her Majesty is the National Secretary in charge of the diaspora of the Organisation des Intellectuels Traditionnels du Benin, based in West Africa in the city of Cotonou. She is also in residence in the state of New York, where she is a faculty member of the Dutchess Community College. Currently, Her Majesty instructs underserved youth in the Mid-Hudson Valley of New York State. Queen Mother has been a consultant to Purchase College, State University of New York, Global Strategies and International Programs, Office for Global Education for their Fulbright Hayes Fellowship. She recently received the 2024 Black Divas Award for her advocacy of Black maternal health care. Queen Mother is an interfaith leader, human rights activist, author, and photographer. As a high priest, she of Voodoo, she founded in 2017 the Afro-Atlantic Theologies and Treaties Institute. And there's much more. A member of the Association for the Study of the Worldwide African Diaspora and the New York African Studies Association. Her Majesty lectures extensively on human rights and spatial justice, the Ma'afa of captive Africans, Afrophobia, and its impact on contemporary culture, sites of memory, and civic art. And finally, I would just share that she is a mother of music composer, writer, and her official photographer, Her Royal Highness Prince Marshall Davis of Messy Room Productions. So without further ado, thank you. Your Majesty.
That introduction. Thank you, everyone. In our culture, in Haitian culture, whenever we encounter anyone, we exchange the words honor or honneur and respect. So when I say honneur, please say respect. We'll do this 3 times. Honneur.
Respect.
Honneur.
Respect.
Honneur.
Respect.
Thank you. Power, deep power, fair. The word is said, may the deed be done. I thank you for being here, and I'm so glad to see you, Sister Esther. It's been a very long time. I don't know if you recall, and I think I would be seeing you again soon.
Yeah, yes, I do recall.
I see Brother Onaji and Dr. Lemmy and a number of people here. I'm delighted to be amongst you, and Brother Jamoki as well. And thank you to Sister Fatima Meds for inviting me here as well. I'm going to confess I was a little surprised to receive the invitation to speak, but very happy to do so. I was also surprised about the nature of some of the questions, because I thought we had resolved some of these things. Queen Mother Moore was mentioned, and I thought to myself, why are we asking some of these questions? We've gone from Queen Mother Moore to Queen Mother Doherty, Queen Mother Semevo. Not that I dare put myself in the same historical category as our ancestor. But my point is, we had an elder in the early 20th century who started on, that everybody knows. Everybody knows Queen Mother Moore's name. But the fight for reparations in earnest began with her in the 20th century, and here we are with another Queen Mother who many people don't know, but hopefully will after today, but is in the first quarter of the 21st century, and we're still raising questions about our Africanness. We have spent an entire a century and a half defining Africanness, Blackness, with the negritude movements, with any number of the Black is Beautiful, Black Power movements, any number of the New Negro, they're all sort of coming to my head, any number of exercises and movements that are defining and redefining the nature of our Africanness. And I hope that we will no longer be asking this question, because if we don't know who we are, I promise you our enemies know who we are. They don't have any questions or concerns about who's Black here, who's an African, and who isn't. And so it is my hope that we will have clarity about this, because I don't want my son asking this question. I don't want our children asking these questions. I don't want our youth asking these questions. Africanness it's a geographic matter, it is a social matter, it is a legal one, it is a metaphysical one. Africanness starts with the continent of Africa. It starts in that space, and within that space we find Blackness. And Blackness not just as the profundity of our melanin, but Blackness as a metaphysical construct, Blackness as a frequency. And for me, Africanness has to do with that frequency. I thought about one of my favorite quotes. You know, when I first got to this country, couldn't read a lot of English, but one of the first 5 books my father gave me was by Ralph Ellison. And there was something in there that cracked me up when I was about 6 years old, and it still brings joy to my heart now. And it has to do with Blackness, and for me, there's no difference between our Blackness and our Africanness. It says, "By Black is, and it ain't. Black will get you, and it won't. It do, Lord, and it don't." And if you don't get it, then maybe you're not supposed to be here having this conversation, right? With all due respect to the notion of New Africanness, I consider myself an old one, because I never I've never abdicated my Africanness at any point in my journey of centuries, in my journey from leaving the African continent to being deported to Haiti and to Cuba, and then a secondary diaspora here to the United States, and then going back again in my own person to Benin Republic and to Cameroon. I've always been African. I'm not going to surrender that, because when I get back home, and I am back home, ain't nobody going to tell me I don't have a right to be here. The land that is mine, I want that land back. The space that was mine, I'm taking that back. The experiences that I had and that my ancestors had, that has to be valued, counted, and integrated in the definition, and the broader definition of what Africanness means, and what Africanness looks like in the 21st century. I am a part of the droit de retour movement, the right of return, and both as a social and a metaphysical and juridical manner. I'm not going to ever say I gave up being Black. Because when I want to be back home and I need to be back home and I am back home, nobody's not going to tell me I don't belong. Similarly, if I choose to stay here in the Americas, I built this place, my people built this place. And all of us, whether we're from Brazil, we're from Haiti, we're from Puerto Rico, from Colombia, from the United States, we all suffered a series of traumas that are intergenerational. Because it didn't matter what boat we landed on, what stop we made on those boats that we landed in. At no point do I think we consciously or legally or politically said we're not Africans anymore. If anything, it's been other people who have been defining who and what we are. Labeling us, all right? And whether or not we choose to accept that is another matter. But for me, understanding Africanness also has to do with understanding my Afro-humanity. And what do I mean by that? Afro-humanism is like all other forms of humanism, only it takes into account not only the centrality of my personhood, but that of those who exist in other planes, those who came before me and those who are yet to be. I don't move, I don't act, I don't breathe without consciousness of their being. And understanding how the consequences of my actions feed not only those who are yet to be born, not only those, my own immediate progeny, but how it affects my ancestors. And it affects my ancestors because for those of you who belong to African traditional-based religions, you know you have to make a bull. You know you have to make petitions. You know you have to make offerings to the ancestors, to the voodoo, to the orisha, to the inkisi, to the lwa. You know you have to do that. But in so doing, those fruit that you offer or those animals that have to be sacrificed from time to time, it isn't just those spirits that you are feeding. You are feeding yourself. You're literally feeding the blood in your own veins. The genetic knowledge that you carry. Our ancestors need to be fed. They need to be fed. They need to be acknowledged and recognized so that they know how to best instruct us and to guide us in this space and time. Because it is going to be our responsibility, and it is our responsibility to do the same thing moving forward. So reparations isn't just a financial and economic issue for me and therefore for us, but it is also, again, it's a metaphysical one, it is a spiritual one, and it begins with self-repair, with spiritual liberation, and that kind of spiritual grounding. Because once our minds and our spirit is free, there is nothing, there is no one who's going to take anything away from us. And with this understanding of our connection to our ancestors, right, there can be no fear in us. Our ancestors foresaw a more prosperous time for us, a period where we are, in fact, I time myself, where we are, in fact, their brightest incarnation. So Africanness means being Afro, it means being Pan-African, it means being Afro-humanist, it means being Afro-optimist, it means being Afro-futurist. Because if they couldn't imagine a future for us, I wouldn't be here. If I couldn't imagine a future for us, my son wouldn't be here. And hopefully my son will follow suit with his own children one day. And it is well, I use myself only as an example of what has to happen fractally among all of us. It has to be reflected among each and every single person within the sound of my voice. I thank you for your time and your attention. I look forward to answering any questions later on.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, and we thank all of the presenters for that knowledge that they distributed to us, and we appreciate it. And we also want to appreciate the ancestors for giving them the knowledge to share with us. And at this time, we're going to let those attendees here that may have questions for any of the presenters. The format we're going to use, you can just raise your hand. You can use the raise hand sign, or you can just raise your hand and we'll recognize you. So at this time, we're open for questions from anyone for any of the presenters.
Yes, Elder Sister Fatima and Baba J, Dr. Onaje. Elder Sister Fatima. You need to unmute.
Thanks. Yeah. So I had wanted to acknowledge and thank all of the speakers. I think this topic is very important. However, if we may indulge in going a little bit more in depth on the topic, I heard what everybody said. For example, Mama Ayo, I too am a New African. And there is an option in the Republic of New Africa to naturalize. And that's one of the things. Another thing wasn't mentioned that makes us New Africans is that we are internationalists by nature, and which is what the Queen Mother was speaking about, that we'll always be African. Yes, there is no doubt about that, but there's a lot of unfinished business here in this country. So the Republic of New Africa is set up, and I'm not trying to push it or anything, but set up in a way where anybody, any African from around the world, can naturalize and become a full-fledged citizen. And that is one other thing that makes us New Africans, is that we're from all over the diaspora and the world, actually. But for me, there was mention of our collective trauma on the flyer. For me, the most important part about the trauma we've suffered is not only the lack of land sovereignty, because we were sovereign people in Africa, minding our business, building extraordinary things. And our sovereignty was stolen territorially, but mostly it was stolen individually. And so Africans here, we have the Willie Lynch syndrome, and I wasn't brought up here, but I identify deeply. The Willie Lynch syndrome, where we get very upset if anybody touches any part of our sovereignty, especially if it's somebody who looks like us. So for me, anyway, I'm getting a little bit off topic maybe, but the most important thing that we have lost is our sovereignty, both territorial and individual. We have lost also within the sovereignty our culture, our being, our languages, our names, and on and on. And so kind of forgotten how to do most of that. And that is just something that I think we should always bear in mind when dealing, for example, the brothers on the street. They each have their territory, and don't you dare go into that. But it's not really about territory, it's more about sovereignty. It's Black power that we never had. And so we work very hard to try and keep that zealously. I yield.
Thank you, Sister Fatima. And as I stated earlier, please, for those that has direct questions for individual speakers, please raise your hand. Our next person for question is Brother Onaji. Brother Onaji, Dr. Onaji, you have the floor.
Thank you. Observation of all protocol. I'd like to commend the COBRA's International Affairs Commission for this phenomenal event that you have put together. And my question really is to all of the panelists, and that is, the Health Commission, and must be the ancestor speaking to all of us, is embarking upon the question of our healing around the 5 areas, harm areas, and right now we actually are looking at the area of peoplehood and nationhood. So my question to you is, if you can speak a little bit more about the healing that you think we should be engaged in, as Queen Mother Dorothy, told us, it's in our preparation for reparations. So what is the healing that needs to happen now for us? I'm complete and I yield.
I'd like to take that. I'd like to offer some perspectives on that, because it was also mentioned by Sister Fatima about the collective trauma that we're carrying, and on top of that, more trauma is loaded by the systems that we have to maneuver in our life, and whether it is through the political or economic or social systems that continues to re-traumatize in a sense. So we're carrying that even further without a chance to even, for most people, a chance to even heal from past intergenerational trauma. In my community, in the Garifuna community, there is this healing ritual that brings people, families together. It is called the Dugu, where the families join together in a 1 week long kind of ritual to honor the ancestors and those who are present and the younger generation. So it's bringing the family together to, in a sense, purge out all those defilements in their mental states, to feel free in this space, to release it through dance, through singing, through sometimes even getting entranced by the dances and the music and invoking the spirits of the ancestors in that sense. So I'm saying that worked for our communities in the traditional sense, but critical to that is that people must come together. Trying to heal oneself by oneself might not be as effective, but bringing families together or persons together to confront their truths about what is harming and how can they liberate. And perhaps the Western approaches might not be as effective. The very clinical ways in which people are seeing and very distant individualistic ways might not be as effective. In fact, when some years ago when I was studying psychology, I got so frustrated with Western psychology. It's very clinical approach without really having a human awareness as part of the healing strategy. And so I'm saying that perhaps not focusing on the trauma, but also getting into a deep awareness of self in silence often, mindfulness practices, meditative practices, in order to, within oneself and in groups, in families, to be able to sit with that awareness and let it release freely. It could be crying moments, it could be weeping moments, it could be happy, joyous moments, but staying in that awareness and building that deep inner awareness is a powerful way, in my view, to start that healing. And I could say for too long, we're looking for external sources of healing, but we need to find even the food we eat. Is it healing, or is it also creating more illness and trauma within ourselves? The Western kinds of food that is promoted for us to consume, we have to be deeply aware constantly of what we put in our bodies, what we put in our minds, or what words we tell our family, our younger gen. Are we spreading more trauma to the people that surrounds us? So it's almost like we have to really be conscious moment by moment of the words we spread, because words do also bring more trauma, and we can put generations of trauma to spread. The food that we consume could also lodge trauma in our bodies and create more illness, because if we lack that awareness of what we're putting in our system, especially all these junk foods and a lot of stuff that we're just doing in a sense mindlessly, will not heal us and will not liberate us. So we have to consciously take on habits, new ways of awareness, deeper awareness of ourselves within. And when we go within, we also connect deeply with our ancestors, and I think that brings a good foundation for healing. I'm just throwing that out, just in my view.
Queen Deland. Oh,
By any means necessary.
I yield, Queen Mother.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to say I agree very much with what Brother Enriquez has said, but I also want to point out that I am encountering more and more Black psychologists, a younger generation of people who are open to and aware of various African-based traditional practices and are making a point of incorporating those things in their understanding of their discipline. It's important that we understand that the nature of trauma within us has a psychological component and a biochemical component to it, in addition to the spiritual side. So there are psychologists, Black psychologists and therapists who are working on those issues. We have priests who are dealing with the spiritual component. The cleansing ceremonies that you spoke of, these rituals are absolutely necessary. They foster self-awareness, but they're not going to happen if we remain internally biased, if we have internalized Afrophobia, if we are, sort of worried about, oh my God, this person is practicing Obeah or doing voodoo, whatever that means. As long as we remain fearful of the knowledges, the sacred knowledges that our ancestors had, we're not going to be able to get past that. So I think we need to also create spaces of engagement where the political conversations are also happening with priests and priests who are interested in this kind of discourse, interested in the nature of reparatory justice for us as individuals and societally. I believe very much that we do need to have these kind of initiatory, culturally private spaces so that the things that we need to talk about, the things that we need to express, get done without Big Brother watching over us. I feel in some ways our lives are way too public. We talk about everything. We show everything that we do. And when you're exposed like that, guess who else sees you? Your enemy does. And learns how to manipulate those, acknowledges and sees what your weaknesses are, our weaknesses are, and manipulates that. And so I think we're going to have to find ways of creating other spaces. They need not be, sacerdotal in nature. We need to use, for example, our sororities and our fraternities in different ways. We need to use our national associations of Black psychologists, national associations of journalists, national associations of engineers and architects in a much more strategic fashion, in a manner that is going to allow a certain type of sacred knowledge to come in, develop strategies that are ultimately going to lead to our liberation, but is not going to let every Tom, Dick, and Harry know, or Karen know what we're up to, so that they find themselves in a position where they can trip us up. We need think tanks. We're in the quandary that we're in because of think tanks, and we need to prioritize some of the money, our spending habits, so that we invest in the kinds of institutions that are in fact going to lead to our liberation. And I yield. Thank you.
I just want to add, thank you. I agree with the previous speakers, but I'm going to tell you our perspective from New Africa, the Ministry of Health and Society. We have put into a conversation with our citizens that healing from within, because as a New African, you need to work with the community. We have been socially programmed to be individualistic. We are the prime examples of our captors. We have taken on what we call the Eurocentric culture, trying to carve out what we call an identity and a culture, but it still is a reflection of our captive society. The issues of brothers and sisters, the whole issue of marriage, how we view our family, how we view our community. In New Africa, we say the community is more important than the individual. We all come to the table as freedom fighters, as people who want to do something, but we have been traumatized. That trauma keeps us from working in concert with our brothers and sisters because of personality glitches, because of different things that we don't want to talk about. So we have called on our sisters to come together, and we have done this. That's why we've taken them to the forest. We've exposed ourselves to the very dirty secrets that we bring from our families to the table that affects how we communicate with each other, how we love on each other, because we don't love ourselves. That's the work that we're asking New Africans to do, because we have come with epigenetic trauma, we've come with social trauma, we've come with family secrets that's passed on, and we do this work. We're asking the brothers to do the same thing so that we build family, because the foundation of New Africa is the family. The family has been broken in many forms and fashions. So we have our strategies to do that. We have internal contradictions that we can't work together because of whatever the problem is. As the Queen Mother and the brother said before, we take ourselves to the forest. We go into what we call sacred space. We have our rituals. We do our moon ceremonies, and we release the trauma so that we open up for healing. And if it's if we identify that this trauma is deeper and deeper, we have to take our sisters to perhaps a spiritualist, because sometimes, as I have learned in my sojourn in Africa, you're supposed to be a spiritualist, and the things that you see, the things that you hear from our ancestors, and you take them back to the family, and they say, oh, we got to pray over you because you have demons in you. No, you are supposed to be a spiritualist. That is supposed to be your destiny. When you came from your mother's womb, when you came from a mentor, you came to this earth, you made a promise. You made an agreement. We have not been able to tap into that as melanated, highly spiritual people. And as the sisters and the brother said before, yes, we're being socially manipulated. Yes, we can't figure out what is real and what isn't real. We step away from the foods. We step away from that demonic music. We step away from the Eurocentric practices. No, many of us don't. We have one foot in what we're trying to do to free ourselves up, and we have another foot in being in this society. So it becomes a very interesting problem, and it's a multi-level, because we have traumas economically. We can't even build New Africa because nobody wants to pay taxes. We can't build anything. We're busy with our handout for other people to supply us, when we have the capability to provide these things for ourselves, tap into our magic. That's what we call it, that melanin magic that we can manifest. And we can't do that unless we truly understand, through spirit, through prayer, through meditation, through healing, all of it. What does that mean? What am I here for on this planet in this lifetime? Am I supposed to be a part of the Redeemers? Or am I just supposed to just fade away and into obscurity? Those are the things that we ask. What do you put on this planet to do? And most of our children, our women, and our brothers do not know, because our right to live who we are, to be who we're still being manipulated by what's happening right now. So I agree with the previous speakers. Well, however, let's take it to the next level. Are we supposed to be here to redeem ourselves and to build our nation, if we choose, in America, if we choose to build nations in the Caribbean, knowing that the indigenous have the original right to those islands, knowing that if we choose, we can go back to Africa, if we choose, because that is our divine right, and be able to be accepted there, and to ask those leaders and chiefs who helped in the enslavement of our people, who collaborated, they give us divine right to return. That's part of the reparations we're talking about. We are asking for reparations here because there is injury that has to be adjusted to. That has to be. And it doesn't mean money. It means we want institutions. We have a lot of healing work to do. We have a lot of building work to do. We have vocational trainings that we have to rebuild into our people. And they have to tap in to making sure that whatever we do is in divine alignment with Mother Earth, divine alignment with our ancestors. That's all the areas that the Ministry of Health and Society are reaching out to. Social workers, psychologists, doctors, a whole new frame. We want to have a healing system that reflects Cuba. We want our herbs to be our healing. And not to say that there can't be operations or things like that. These are the things that we want. Herbal healing, meditation, sun, good food that we grow. Not genetically modified nonsense that's going to keep us, and all of us, sick. High blood pressure, diabetes, prostate issues, our women, attacks on their wombs, all of it. And to know, above all, that you must go to your ancestors. You must go to your Ori. You must understand. What is our divine mission? I yield.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. The next question from the attendee is Brother Shabbat. You have the floor, Brother Shabbat.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me, Brother Morgan?
Yes, sir, we hear you.
Okay, very, very good. I really appreciate the presentations that were made by our guests, and I really appreciate the question that Brother Dr. Onaje asked. I had a similar question, but since there have been discussions around responses to his question, I'll just limit my question to this, and would like to ask for those of us who are asking questions to keep in mind that there's others on the call who may have questions, so limit your time, and that might also go for others who might choose to want to respond back. The idea of sacred places fascinates me, and have been used by myself and others that I've been with in the past. Not so much now, because some of our staunch nationalists, including myself, instead of going, the only space we might go to is in front of the tube to watch the game. The indoctrination of the Western, psychology on us. How do we find these places? Where can we find these places? Who can we talk to? And keep in mind, particularly in those areas of the world where Black people in America make up about 14% of the population. So we're not the majority of the population. So we're heavily indoctrinated by what is fed to us during the channels in which we interact with other people, including ourselves. I mean, I can't go out the house without seeing some manifestation of Western thought around me. So I'm interested in those who have been freed at least a little bit of that. What suggestions can you give to us? We're trying to find those places, trying to find them and keep them to ourselves, because their energy provide, I guess, comfort, but it's difficult sometimes. I yield.
Well, if I may, in our tradition, we believe that the earth is a sacred place. So just about any place that you are, because again, you are divinity in human form, right? Wherever you are, it is sacred. But we can look at spaces that are formally sanctified, formally acknowledged, be they monuments, their museums, their cemeteries, their bodies of water where last acts were performed. There could be any number of places. In fact, one of my works is, well, you can't see it, but it's this book. It's called Redlining a Holocaust, Memorials and the People of the Afro-Atlantic. I went to 90 distinct geographic places in North America, the Caribbean, South America, Europe, and Asia, photographed them, wrote about them, connected a number of them to each other, that will give you a sense of what some of these important sacred spaces are. But if you can't get to any of these places, the most sacred place of all is in your own heart, in your own being. You can create a sacred space in your home. It could be something as modest as a shelf where you have it lined and you have photographs of those who have passed on that shelf or on that table, and you light candles, you make offerings, you bring flowers, you speak to them on a daily basis, you sing their favorite song on their birthday, that sort of thing. Those are sacred spaces that are informal ones that we need to tap into and call on spirit on a daily basis to help us move forward. This is part of what I'm talking about when I say we make ori, we make ebo, we make offerings to our ancestors. You feed them, you acknowledge them, you know that even though they're not physically around you, they're here. And I know there's a bunch of them standing behind me, right? I move with them. I am never alone. And all of us have to move with that knowledge that we are never alone. This is part of what Afrohumanism is about. So wherever you are and they are, that space is sacred. We've got to defend and protect that space and not allow anyone to violate us, especially in this country, given who we have in office and what is going on.
Ashe.
And this country, the United States.
Ashe. I definitely agree, but I want to take it into perspective where group healing is very, 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 very important. And you go to a park, you go around a tree. As I said, we pick certain times of the year. We deal with the equinoxes. We deal with sometimes our ancestors' earth strongs. Definitely, when I go to our family plot where all of us were buried here in America, where we were given those places by the slave master. Those are places that I come and I burn incense and I call their names and I make sure that they know that I am your daughter. I am a descendant. I have completed the triangular trade. I have been in Africa. I have been born in America. I have traveled to the Caribbean. That triangular trade is important, and every time there's a chance to go to Maroon Town, there's a chance to be at the ocean, to pledge myself to Mommy Waters, to look at the rivers and to go to the mountains and to eat the food. All of those things are blessings. The whole point is gather as men, talk about what it is we are supposed to be, because the brothers are supposed to be the defenders and the protectors of the women, children, and elders. And we see as elders, as women, that has been taken away from our community, we're trying to encourage our youth. They have to be taken. They have to be taken through rites of passage. Even if it's like 6 months, they have to be told what it is that manhood involves, how it ties into ma'at, how it ties into the divine feminine, the divine masculine, and how we are to be together. So it's a matter of just gathering, letting elders know, because you have examples of spiritual people, you have examples of brothers who are in the what I call the military defense, you have brothers who are examples of eating well, eating healthy, being vegan, you have brothers who are just elders to counsel, and you just have to come together and you have to release. The big part of healing, you must release, you must cry together, you must scream together, you must admit the traumas that you are holding in your heart. You are holding in your heart. You know what your journey has been and what you've been through and what you had to do. Just like the women have to do. We have to deal with rape, molestation. We have to deal with abortions. We have to deal with loss of children. We have to deal with all of that. And we have to release it layer by layer by layer. And to then come back and give our children and our men the mother's ashe, but from a positive point of view. Positive. Do not talk about how ugly you are. Do not talk about how stupid you are. Tell them that they're brilliant, they're magnificent, because this is our time to do that, to manifest into our children and their children that they have to be a part of this movement for redemption. I yield.
Thank you. Thank you. Just check on time to be respectful of time itself and each individual time. We are scheduled to be over at 4. Next, I don't know if Brother Jeremy, did you have anything you wanted to say to that question?
Just briefly, I just wanted to also, I'm in sync with what both of my colleagues have spoken, and very powerfully about the need for healing collectively and finding the space. The question also about sacred spaces, there is also, just to add to all that has been said, which I really totally am in sync with, but the practice of going within, that space of finding that peace within and carving those times daily, each day, to pause and to just not be sucked into the busyness of the day. If you could carve 10, 20 minutes a day and find that space of calm and that space of having that balance in your mind, I think is a powerful way to start the day and to end the day. So if you keep that practice, being in awareness, being aware of your breath going in and out, and just be resting your mind in that space. That's a sacred space that could build into a very powerful self, and also for taking out layers and layers, as Mama Ayos mentioned, of those deeply embedded trauma. So taking it a little bit at a time and being able to expand that is a very powerful act, a very powerful practice. So your space within is also sacred, along with the natural environment, the trees, and all of that. I yield.
Thank you. Thank you. Brother Jim O'Kay, you have the floor.
Greetings, family. Yes, appreciating what's been said. Thank you, Brother Morgan Moss and Sister Esther Jose for bringing the commission to incorporate into the general community at large. About what's been said already, appreciating the speakers that have spoken already and what they have spoke about. I do a lot of work, as many people know, in this area of spiritual healing as it relates to our movement and even on my personal journey. What I would like to offer, just because I know, is that for those of you who may be interested in a deeper dive on this conversation, Royal Majesty, the Pajita, Dr. Dorothy Desir will be the featured guest on my show on tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. on YouTube. We'll spend a much deeper dive of going into African spirituality and healing as it relates to reparations. My question, though, is I thought that this program was kind of going to more address some of those issues of identity that we've been struggling with in the reparations movement. We have, the term has been introduced, New African, but we also have ADOS that's out there. We also have FBA that's out there. We have Afro-descendants. We have descendants of enslaved Africans in the U.S., Native Indigenous people, Moors, Monica, that have in space. And as would say, many of us, I think, would agree to how we move forward in the reparations space, dealing with these different, trying to deal with these different identifiers that people have been pushing forward into the reparations space. So I don't know if there's some comments on that, response to that. Thank you.
Brother Morgan, can we take a couple of questions and then we can, because noticing the time, if we can take the several questions and then we can ask our guest contributors to respond at one time. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Our last hand up that I see is from Sister Shakira.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me well. I'm driving, but I've been fascinated by this conversation. I really appreciate the discussion around the healing initiative. I've been working with the Health Commission, the COBRA Health Commission, putting together this year to heal. And my question specifically is about the word is leaving me. The rites of passage initiative for our young people. I am a grandmother raising my grandson, and I know there are thousands of people like me in our community, and we're looking for solutions for our grandsons whose fathers are not in their lives. And it seems to me that the rites of passage initiative would be a good response. So I'm hoping that people will be willing to share resources of how we find those programs where we can include our sons and grandsons. And there was also another thing I was going to share around. Had to do with Jamoke's question about the issue of identity. I cannot think of what it is, but if I can think of it, I'll just put it in the chat. But thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yes,
and there's a question that I'd just like to share, if I may, that came, there's from Facebook, Sister Jendai Serwa from the Stop the Mangamizi campaign. She's asking if Queen Mother Dr. Doherty, can elaborate on your comments about the difference between being Black and African. So obviously that was much earlier, but I just wanted to share it before we ran out of time.
Okay, thank you. For the last few questions, if we want to combine them for the presenters to answer, you may do so at this time.
I'll go first and let the other two finish. As I said in my presentation, and I'll be a little bit more specific. First of all, we know that we've come through many dynamics. I feel like people want to call themselves whatever they want to call themselves, whether they be African descendants, whether be Africans born in America, whether we are Black, because some people do not want to move past Black, Afro-Americans, African Americans. We call ourselves New African because we established ourselves that we are African people. We are the descendants of enslaved Africans. However, we have a genetic code that proves to the world that we did not come from just one tribe. We were mixed in due to our enslavement, due to breeding farms, et cetera, et cetera. So we take the position of, if you are Moor, if you are indigenous, if you are Aboriginal, if you are ADOS, our issue is we want to free the land. We want to establish a nation here in America. Will you be, as a person who is enslaved African or indigenous or Aboriginal, will you join us in our quest to free this land, as well as others, that is dominated by capitalism, imperialism, neocolonialism, white supremacy, and racism? I yield.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to pick up on a couple of things. Maybe I'll work backwards. Many of you remember this book, this orange book, the Durban Declaration and Program of Action Plan, that came out as the outcome document of the World Conference Against Racism. I think if we're going to talk about reparations and identity, that is a good place to start, because within the context, and this is, purely a juridical thing, of understanding what Africanness is, African descendant is, it ties back to what I'm using their language, the transatlantic slave trade, the Magansemi, the Ma'afa, but it ties back to that historical experience and all the attendant traumas, intergenerational issues, the disparities that accompany that. If we're going to talk about reparations, we've got to keep that understanding of our identities, collective and individual, in mind. I don't want to revisit it, but the book is still available, and if not a hard copy, you can find it on the UN website. I also want to point out that it isn't just enslaved Africans who seek reparations, people who were colonized as well. That too is an equally traumatic experience, and it is the twin of the process of enslavery. And both of these things are considered crimes against humanity. And so long as both of these issues affect our lives historically and continue to do so, we have a right to seek reparations. The person who asked about the difference between Black and African, I remember when I first came here, I was to the U.S., I was 5 years old, somebody told me I was Black, I was like, no, I'm not. Why? Because Black for me meant ethnically, it was an ethnic group of African people who were from this place. I was Haitian, and so I couldn't be Black, but fast forward, as a Pan-Africanist, I'm all of these things, all of these experiences, all of the places that I've been to, all the hearts that I have been touched by make me a global African person. And I don't care what label you want to put on me. I know who I am, and I refuse to get caught into this sort of tribalistic thinking about things that has been responsible for divisiveness. This is serious. I just came back from Colombia, I had sponsored 5 young women, Afro-Colombianas, to this event, and they were telling me about how divided everything is. Say, this is my hand. One person is a palanquero, one is a Barranquillan, one is an Afro-Colombian, one is a Negro, one is a something else. And it goes on and on and on. And because of all of these divisions, all of these little boxes that we were put in, and some of us choose to stay in, we're never able to create a space of solidarity to move forward. These fingers can't be divided like that. They've got to come together and make a fist, right? And that's where the union means makes a force. That's where our power is. Blackness and Africanness, I said earlier, it's a vibrational thing too. It's metaphysical. It could be looked at in terms of ethnicity. The issue of colorism should not factor into our thinking because it's one more piece that divides us. And then finally, again, I'm working backwards, that we as African descendants, as Black people, as Africans, old and new, we're not a monolithic group. And so we shouldn't expect everyone to think the same way. We should embrace our differences because it's like a facet on a beautiful stone that is us. And so there's a different light, a different energy, a different perspective that can only enrich all of us collectively. So let us embrace that. However, given these little strings of thought, if we're going to create a document, then let's bring everybody's voice to the table. Let's articulate what those concerns are and put that forward when we confront those persons, those institutions, those governments from whom we are seeking reparations. Thank you. I yield.
I want to address the question about the rites of passage for young men, because it is also a question that we continue to try to grapple with here in Belize, and I guess all over the Caribbean, even in the United States. When we have in our prisons, for example, dominated by young Black men, it is a manifestation of a broken rite of passage, because there are men who are not, older men who are not healed and have not been able to hold together family units or whatever the case may be for whatever reason, but there are an increasing number of young Black males who are hurting because a rite of passage is broken. So the challenge will remain, how do we heal that brokenness, since in recognition that it is going to continue to affect younger generations. So it brings a greater challenge to us as older men in our society to find ways to interact and to bring healing and to reconnect a rite of passage for a better society. If that is not done, we will continue to face this increasing problem of marginalization and systemic marginalization of young Black males, as we're seeing here in our society in Belize and in other countries in the Caribbean. And not only are they marginalized in their family structure, but also within the school system. We have an increasing number of our higher education in the Caribbean dominated by women. And is the school system finding ways to teach in methodologies that is empowering of young Black males? So all these rites of passage within the school system, within the families, in the broader society, still has to be worked on in order to heal for all of us and the benefit of society. And if we are not having healed black males, we're continuing also to destroy the family. And if we're not having healed black women, then it is the same result. So there is this crying need for that healing from which will come liberation. I yield.
Thank you. I forgot to mention that I did start this past summer in one of the inner cities here, a Youth Warriors program, which is part of the Imperial Corps, Agoj of the African diaspora. It was intended to tap into both the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And part of what we did was we had a couple of classes that talked about what those models look like. What does the divine masculine look like? What does divine feminine look like? Give a history of resistance to our young people that also brings in our leaders who are often very young themselves when they were fighting for liberation, to make them understand that don't think because you're 15 or 16 you can't take on the world. You can. So we did that, but we also had like Kalinda, Caribbean stick fighting classes, archery, tug of war, just some basic things that kids don't even get to do anymore because they're always doing, this. So being outdoors, being with each other without the sexual tensions of anything, even doing meditation was something that made a huge difference in the lives of these young people. And I'd be happy to share what I did with anyone because I designed it so that it's a flexible model and it can work wherever you are. So I left my website in the chat box, and I can tell you more about that later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you. Yes, we also want to, as we come getting close to a close, we want to express our thanks and gratitude for the fantastic contribution that each presenter has made, and also for the attendees' questions and comments. And we also want to thank the Sister Christy Flowers, the Chief Operator at XTV Belize, for broadcasting this workshop today. We want to express our gratitude. Before we get to the last question, I think I saw
Mama Kenny. Yes.
Kenny, for the
Yes.
Yeah, Mama Kenneth had her hand up.
Yes. And there was another question as well on Facebook, but which we might not get to answer, but I would like to share it anyway. Go ahead, Mama Kenneth.
Thank you. This is really, really brief. I just want to know, this recording, will it be posted and shared? Because Brother Jamoke and I probably are the ones most on the front line in exactly what he said. And I want to thank the contribution of tribalistic thinking that breeds divisiveness. I'm going to use that. I hope it's okay. I don't want to plagiarize, but it is a massive situation. I'm actually writing a statement of opposition right now because I have a piece of legislation that says only Black people who are descendants of enslaved will get reparations. So I hope this is going to be posted because there's so much information here that I'd like to be able to use in my fight against this tribalistic thinking that breeds divisiveness. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'd like to just share a question that was raised again. What are the consequences and the impact or disadvantage of us not having an international legal personality in relation to our quest for reparations? So that identity question again, and what it means. Thank you, Brother Morgan.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Do we have time for any comments on that question?
Yeah, if people are willing to stay an extra 5 minutes or so. Please. Any responses?
Well, all I can say is from the perspective of the Republic of New Africa, we have our reparations claim. Our reparations claims are constantly being updated because we're talking about reparations for the descendants of enslaved Africans here in the U.S. However, our reparations has extended to reparations needs to be awarded to every place that enslaved Africans, because that's what we were when we touched down, whether it was in Belize, whether it was in Haiti, whether it was in Cuba, whether it was in Bahamas, everywhere enslaved Africans were. However, we are also calling on the African nations to claim for reparations. We're asking African nations to, in their reparations claim, state that they owe no debt. They owe nothing. They own their mineral rights. They do not have to have outside interference. That is part of the reparations, that particularly owing no debt. And to also offer the opportunity for enslaved Africans, the descendants of enslaved Africans, to come back to Africa and help build, as well as asking the people here in America, help build new Africa and make a decision. If you want to stay inside the belly of the beast, or do you want to build your nation, become sovereign, independent, and glorious? And with that, I yield.
Thank you. There are a number of international organizations and entities who are seeking reparations. And in fact, I think I see a couple of people who represent them. One is Rosita de Seville, if I'm not mistaken. There's MIA, the International Movement for Reparations, that in fact did go to the courts using the records of an enslaved member or member whose parents had been enslaved to pursue reparations. And what do you think happened there? You know, we're dealing with people who they will change the rules all the time. The goalpost gets moved constantly, and so. We have efforts towards that, but we've got to be much more strategic about things because, again, they love to play games that way. We have Dr. Marie Remy with CAD. Well, I'm not going to say it in Haitian language, but basically the title translates to it's a committee of African descendant Haitians. Now, for me, the fact that we have to say African descendant Haitians like there was somebody else who's Haitian is African descendant, you know, but it is a reality. But it is a reality, you know, because there are people who are Haitian and they're like just loving their mixture and they're this and they're that and the other thing. The primacy of being an African descendant is not at the core of their being. So CAD has to make it clear that we identify as African descendants. But they too are pursuing reparations. But these are long and costly processes. And again, with a series of enemies, because it's not just one. And they don't just speak English, right? Even with CARICOM, CARICOM had an enormous victory where reparations were supposed to be given back. But have they seen one red cent, as my Cuban grandmother would say? No. So we pursue, we fight. In some cases, we secure at least on paper. In other cases, we do not. We can go through those existing channels if we want to, but I also posit that we have to create our own institutions, our own, you know, it's our world and our new world order that has to be established. Love the AU, but I'm sorry, someplace they're not very useful. We can't stick with institutions whose ideologies came out of colonialism and post-colonialism. We have to deal with a space that defines and create spaces that really define our sovereignty. You can't wait for somebody to give it to us. You just take it. You declare it. That's it. You know, so declare your sovereignty and let us create our institutions, even as we're dismantling others and trying to, play nice with existing ones. And for that, I appreciate the New African Republic for the work that they're doing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Brother Jeremy, on that last question, did you have any comments before we move to the closure of today's workshop, which has been very, very spiritual, inspirational, and informative. And we definitely want to appreciate our presenters for the most gratitude way that we can. Also, don't want to forget the ancestors for being with us and directing every thought that has been done. So, Brother Jeremy, we want to give you, if you want to speak on that last question. And we also want to thank our moderator, Sister Esther, for her fantastic contributions. And we want to let her have the last closing remark after Brother Jeremy. If nothing else, Brother Jeremy and then Sister Esther, and she can close us out in case I forgot to mention something.
Well, I just wanted to close out by saying this popular saying among my Garifuna people that says, "Aubun amurunu," which means I for you and you for me.
Wow.
It's into the well-being of myself depends on the well-being of others, and the well-being of others also contributes to my well-being. And so we must continue to take very good care of ourselves in this struggle, never to forget that we also are a continuation of our ancestors, and we must continue to remind ourselves and to be in tune that we are honoring them whenever we're trying to heal and transform the world, as is our mission, each of us. So we must take that on each day to find ways in which you can, layer by layer, as Mama Aya mentioned, to take out these traumas that might be at the very root of our own liberation. And so we must work deeply to continue to heal, and collectively and individually, and that is a profound path to our liberation. So with that, I yield.
Wow, giving thanks for all of those really, really stimulating presentations, comments and questions and reflections. Clearly, this is an ongoing discussion that we're going to be having as the International Affairs Commission. Too much to cover in the time that we had, but we're certainly thankful to all of you who have made today possible. I just wanted to share one brief comment. When we were talking about the issue of healing came up, and I was just checking Facebook and stuff, and a video popped up at the same time of Dr. Joy DeGoy, and it was titled, "There Can Be No Healing Without Justice." And so we have to always be mindful of that wider struggle that we're in for reparatory justice, which is much more than money. And we've already heard about the necessity to restore our people's sovereignty, which is also based on our connection to, and our sense of connection to the land, to our Mother Earth. I think part of the alienation that we feel is that we've been dispossessed of our connections to our ancestors, our ancestresses, and our ancestral land. And wherever we've gone, we've sought to recreate family. We've sought to recreate today what we call Africa. So we must be mindful of the huge journey, the huge uphill struggle that we still have to travel. But I'm really thankful that even in this conversation, we've got all of you and everyone all the ancestors and ancestresses that you represent, that you speak for, all the communities of resistance that you are part of, that we can do this, because this is a civilizational quest. The struggle for African repair will actually transform the whole world, because it's our bloodlines that run throughout all members of the human family. And so there is a bigger responsibility on us, but we are capable. So just want to once again thank our special guest contributors, Mama Ayodele Kofi, Brother Jeremy Enriquez, and also Her Royal Majesty Queen Mother Samevo I, Dr. Dawoti Desir. And to each and every one of you, every one of your questions that you asked, your comments in the chat, your reflections have actually made a richer conversation, which is to be continued. We encourage and invite you to join us in the International Affairs Commission. We want to build deeper relationships with each and every one of you, and please see this space as yours. Thank you. Back to you, Brother Morgan.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. And again, we want to express our gratitude for everyone being here, and we definitely want to respect your time. And at this particular time, we're going to bring the meeting to a close. The chat, if anyone wants to look at the chat, it has some information there that you might want to take under consideration. And again, as I appreciate Sister Esther for her dynamic contribution that cannot be valued, that this is just overvalued. It's not, I mean, undervalued for what she's done to bring this to us today. So nothing, yes. Nothing else. We can bring this meeting to a close. Thank you, everyone.
Brother Morgan, please save the chat.
Sorry, I was speaking. Did anyone hear me?
No, I said, please save the chat.
Okay. Yeah, as I said, we'll leave it open for a minute if you don't want to listen. I mean, read it. Again, we want to thank everyone for being here, and your presence has really edified this world. Thank you, and look forward to us meeting again.
Honor the people and save the people.
Thank you.
Yeah, in the house.
I hope you all will do this again soon. This was wonderful. Thank you.